knocked out of my bed, and I hear my daughter screaming at the top of her lungs.
You could see the flash, and then 5 seconds later, both windows gone, the doors wide open.
I mean, we were out of here in 5 minutes.
Our community was evacuated because their homes were contaminated with a toxic gas.
Why did this particular corporation run this butadiene facility into the ground? So bad that it exploded twice.
It's because it's a chemical plant. It's not supposed to blow up.
Tonight, 12 News investigates TPC 2 years later. Families and businesses in Port Neches have done their best to move on, but they're still scarred by the blast.
Well, this Saturday will mark the 2nd anniversary. More than 5,000 people have sued TPC. They may have to wait 2 or 3 years for their cases to make it to court. And tonight, we'll look into the reasons this litigation is taking so long, and we'll investigate what led to the explosions.
We'll start with a preliminary report from the feds that offers crucial clues, and it paints a picture of a plant that knew it had problems.
It never really bothered me that TPC was there.
People in Port Neches had learned to live with their neighbor.
What I saw was my neighbors, my neighborhood, my friends, you know, so it didn't really bother me.
Allison Hudspeth and her friends here in Hebert Woods can see the towers of TPC from their front doors.
I certainly wasn't scared and nervous about anything ever happening.
2 years later,
some noise, something, you know, sets it off, and then, you know, I think about it.
Instantly, her mind bounces back to the pure panic on Thanksgiving Eve, 2019.
At first, we didn't know that it was the plant. I'm yelling, call 911, because I didn't know what had happened.
She was blown out of bed by the blast.
Bright red, bright yellow colors, and of course, I'm running around not knowing what's going on.
Her daughter nearly hit by a wall of glass.
She had just come from the kitchen to go get her phone out of her bedroom, and right as she passed, that whole window blew in.
Allison's son was asleep in the back part of the house.
And his door was jammed shut, the windows exploded. He was walking through glass. The look on his face was like the devil just put his hand on his shoulder and said, "You're coming with me forever." I mean, he just had this horrified look.
Blocks away, downtown, the blast blew open the Avenue Coffee and Cafe.
We started getting messages on Facebook and Instagram, hey, your windows blew out, your doors are wide open.
Randy Edwards and his team rushed to come clean up.
We kind of intended on opening back up that day. I mean, that was the plan. Once we cleaned, we had the windows boarded. People were en route when the second explosion happened.
The fire burned for weeks, decimating most of the plant.
Looks like World War III. Looks like it was all firebombed.
Attorney Brent Kuhn represents more than 1,000 plaintiffs.
There was always this false sense of security that these plants were relatively safe. And they should be. And Jordan, they could be.
Film from the Texas Archive of the Moving Image and the Museum of the Gulf Coast shows the plant being built. 200-ton towers of steel, 17 stories tall, being built on site and hoisted into place.
Just because it's a refinery, it's not supposed to blow up. Just because it's a chemical plant, it's not supposed to blow up.
Kuhn believes this was no accident.
This was very avoidable. It was known to have been avoidable. So it's not an accident, in my opinion.
He points to this preliminary report from the U.S. Chemical Safety Board. It focuses on TPC's issues with something called popcorn polymers, especially in the south unit where the explosion happened.
The product in the lines starts getting gummed up, and when it gets gummed up, it expands. And when it expands within the piping, it can cause the pipe to rupture. It's not a lot different than like when water gets frozen in a pipe.
In this case, flammable liquid. 6,000 gallons of mostly butadiene escaped in less than a minute, forming a flammable vapor cloud. The first explosion happened a minute later.
It's simple chemical knowledge.
In other words, this wasn't a freak accident.
No, and that's why they had PowerPoint presentations shortly before the explosion.
Attorney Mark Sparks at the Ferguson law firm is also on the case. They've filed more than 1,000 lawsuits.
Was the TPC plant in Port Neches operating safely?
Absolutely not.
He says sealed documents obtained during the discovery phase of the litigation spell out the trouble.
It was so simple Shut down, listen to the employees, listen to our clients that worked out there that were begging them, shut this down.
Sparks points to TPC's own air quality measurements taken along the fence line. That monitoring was required as part of a previous EPA settlement. Data posted on the company website shows butadiene releases increased in frequency and severity in the months before the explosion. Further proof, attorneys say, of a popcorn polymer problem.
You know, a small amount of rust can then infect your entire process. So they literally refer to these popcorn problems as infections.
Attorney Jane Leger is also on the case.
That plant was a next-door neighbor to our community.
And you would allege a not-so-good next-door neighbor.
A terrible neighbor.
And there's another layer to this. The lawyers claim TPC was being run primarily by investors.
They are private equity firms out of New York.
Attorneys have sued 10 companies as part of the lawsuits.
There's a layer of shell companies we're trying to ascertain now, the proverbial Abbott and Costello, who's on first.
12 News reached out to TPC and its attorney. Kevin Jacobs simply responded, "I do not comment on my client's pending litigation." As for what's happening at the plant now, company spokesperson Sarah Cronin said in part, TPC Group has been successful in operating safely and in an environmentally sound manner while restoring crude C4 processing capability. She said the facility serves as a terminal for moving raffinate and butadiene. TPC also says it resolved more than 5,700 property claims since the explosion.
We're pushing as hard as we can, and they're pushing back. And we're going to keep pushing until we get finality and conclusion to these cases.
You've put your life back together, but you did this on your own with your insurance companies.
Yes, absolutely.
For people like Allison Hudspeth who sued, the wait continues. It may take 2 or 3 years if the cases have to go to trial.
They should take care of, you know, what the consequence of their negligence is.
She wants money from the lawsuit to repay her insurance company.
Did you or your family think about moving after it?
Absolutely, like every other day and we still think about moving. But right now we're in the best case scenario.
And downtown at the Avenue, the focus is once again on coffee.
I don't think a lot of people talk about it, and then honestly, until you reached out, it was kind of in the back of my head somewhere that it even happened, because we've gone through so many things since then.
Randy Edwards believes Port Neches is stronger than ever.
You just move on, I guess. If we're here, you know, I'm not going anywhere. Southeast Texas is my home.
All of the attorneys are working together at this point, gathering facts. These cases, though, are being handled through something called multi-district litigation, or MDL, basically a single judge overseeing things. After the preliminary work is done, the cases then can then be sent back to individual courts, and they can be tried separately.
My goodness, something really stuck out with me, Derek Jordan, when he said so much has happened since then. You forget it's been 2 years ago.
It feels like an eternity.
Feels like an eternity. Yeah. Well, our coverage of TPC continues online, and we've built a special section. It has links to our previous stories and the videos, and you can read why the attorneys say this case shows the need to reform state and federal laws that govern petrochemical facilities and their operations.